Amiga, do you ever feel caught between two worlds? You cherish your cultural background, pero sometimes it clashes with the realities of raising a family in modern America. You might feel pressured to fulfill traditional expectations, yet you crave a life that allows you to be your true, authentic self. If you're a Latina mom nodding your head right now, I see you, and I get it. Balanced Motherhood is more than your average mommy coaching program. It's a supportive comunidad designed specifically for you. I understand the unique challenges you face navigating between generations and culturas while forging your own path as a mama. Stop feeling like you have to choose between your roots and your future. Balanced Motherhood empowers you to create a life that celebrates your heritage, embraces your motherhood journey, and prioritizes your own happiness. Spots are limited. Don't miss out on this opportunity to connect with a supportive community and create a more balanced life. Visit the link in the show notes to join the waitlist for the next Balanced Motherhood cohort. I can't wait to meet you. Hola, hola, amiga. In today's solo episode, we're diving into a topic that's so important for us as mamas. And that's how to build a parenting style that truly reflects our values as first or second generation Latina moms. If you've ever felt caught between two worlds, like honoring your cultural roots while embracing modern parenting approaches, well, this episode is for you. Feel free to grab a pen and notebook to write down notes because I'm going to share with you some strategies on how you can build your unique parenting style, but also we're going to do a little exercise at the end. If you are driving or not able to write down some notes, feel free to listen to this episode once you are able to. But I promise it will be worth notating a couple things that has worked for me, and I'm sure it can work for you as well. So no te lo pierdas. Welcome to the Viva la Mami podcast. I am your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of two on a mission to help redefine the meaning of motherhood as a modern Latina mom. Motherhood can be a complex journey, interwoven in two identities that often make us feel ni de aquí ni de allá. Viva la Mami is committed to providing you with knowledge, tools, and support to navigate the challenges and triumphs of motherhood as Latina moms. On the show, we'll be discussing culturally relevant topics that will help inform and empower you in whichever season you are in on your motherhood journey. We'll be joined by Latina moms, experts and professionals who can offer advice, practical tips, relatable stories, and honest conversations. So bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space as we create comunidad about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. So, as first or second generation Latina moms, we often face unique challenges in terms of what or how we define our parenting style. Some of the things that are really true to me, it's figuring out is how do I balance traditional values that have been super ingrained in our cultura, but also like how do I balance that with modern parenting approaches, especially as a second generation Latina. I consider myself second generation because my parents came to this country as first generation. And so I do consider myself second generation in that way, but I feel like I'm first generation in other ways, especially as a first generation college student and professional. It is very difficult to figure out how can I balance these traditional values with modern parenting as well. And also another challenge that I often face is navigating cultural expectations from our families, and especially when we get that unsolicited advice. And yes, most of it, we can just ignore it. We can set those boundaries, right? But I'm talking about a lot of the things that we often feel shamed and we feel guilty about the way that we may want to parent. Another challenge is deciding like which traditions to keep and which ones to sort of adapt. And no, I'm not saying to conform into this modern culture, and I'm not telling you to ignore your cultural traditions. No, but there are definitely some traditions that perhaps can be worth modifying. And you know what those are. That's something that I can't really tell you. But these are some things that you have to perhaps reflect and soul search about. Okay, what is it that I want to continue on when it comes to traditions, and what are some things that I may want to change a little bit? I know for one, for me at least, is baptizing our kids. So, and I know that my husband's going to be like, I told you, but we decided to baptize Diego. And for now, we have decided not to baptize Mateo. And so I was brought up Catholic. He was too. And a lot of the decisions that we've made was because we were highly influenced by the things that our families have said. And so when we were first-time parents, I felt super under pressure from my family about baptizing Diego, that I was like, okay, fine, I'll just do it. And I guess I fell into that. And now that I'm a second-time mom, like, this was an agreement that I had with my husband, because the first time he wasn't in fully agreement, but I was like, no, but this is something that my family, wants me to do. And so I felt a lot of pressure in making that decision. And so then Alex gave in and he was like, okay, fine. But now the second time around, first of all, we haven't even talked about it. That's because we're in survival mode all day, every day. But, whenever my family brings that up, I say, right now we don't want to get him baptized. I know that once the kids get older, and if they do ask us questions about, well, why did I get baptized and why did he, or whatever, I just want to make sure that I'm prepared for that. But at this time, I'm not. But I'm sure that there's a lot of things that you can relate specifically on which traditions you want to continue on and which ones you don't. All right. And then another challenge is sort of addressing the language barriers or cultural disconnections that a lot of us as second generation folks have. And for me, I was brought up bilingual, Spanish dominant speaking, but I know many mamas whose first language was English. And a lot of the times they feel this disconnect with their language or culture, really, because of survival. Their family before them had to assimilate. And so this is something that is often a challenge. And I wanted to mention this because I don't want to make individuals who don't speak Spanish or don't have this sense of cultura in them, like, I don't want to ignore them. Like, this is a reality for many Latinas. And then finally, the last challenge that I thought about was, how do we deal with the societal pressures and the stereotypes about Latina moms? And as most of you know, this was my inspiration of creating this platform, really, because of the negative stereotypes that are out there about Latina moms. And oftentimes, unfortunately, this is super perpetuated by our own people. Okay, like I think about a lot of the folks that you see in YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, like all of the social media platforms. You see a lot of this humor about the mamá con la chancla, or the fiery mom, or la mamá que es, escandalosa, and all this stuff. And even I understand that there is this cultural connection that we have as Latinos. And yeah, some of the stuff is funny, some of the stuff is true. But in general, and especially when you're putting yourself out in public, you're creating this image of a Latina and a mom that doesn't really resonate and isn't presented the same way as how we are really as Latina moms. And so how do we deal with that sort of pressure and those stereotypes? And I think those are some of the challenges that can influence the way that we want to parent. Because if we see that out there in the media and on social media about, oh, la mamá, is con la chancla, like we get influenced by that. And that normalizes that sort of behavior. And so these challenges can leave us feel torn, guilty, or even unsure about our parenting choices. But mamas, I'm here to tell you that you have the power to create a parenting style that's uniquely yours, and one that honors your heritage and embraces your modern values. And I have to be honest with you, a veces I be acting like my mom y mi abuelita with the way that I handle discipline. And that is so ingrained in our cultura. And this is more so talking about colonialism and the way that our ancestors had to endure this sort of corporal punishment. And unintentionally, subconsciously, we are still perpetuating that sort of behavior. And we emulate most of our parenting approaches from our past generations as well. And I'm talking about the past generation, the first or second generation before us. So specifically the way that our parents handled discipline, and our abuelitos did too, because we got to witness that, or we got to experience that. And so there are definitely moments when I tell my 3-year-old Diego, like, no vayas a hacer esto porque tal y tal y tal. So I'm literally like threatening him. And that just comes out very natural because that's how I grew up. If you don't do this, I'm not going to do that to you. Or, vas a ver, like always that like finger pointing at you, vas a ver. And I'm like, well, what is it? And at the end of the day, my mom forgot about what it was. She just threatened me just because she wanted to threaten me. And there was nothing that really followed up with that. And so and I feel like sometimes I do act like the way that I was threatened when I was little. At the end of the day, when I finished saying those things to Diego, I'm like, oh my gosh, I literally just sounded like my mom. And I tell Alex this, my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm acting like my mom. And not that I'm saying that I don't want to be my mom, but there were certain behaviors and certain actions that really impacted me. And I would say maybe in a negative way, or in a way in which I had to then figure out ways on how to control my emotional intelligence, on how to control my feelings. And so, there's still a lot of healing that I have to process and a lot of work to get done. But, now that I'm in this journey in parenting, like there is so much that I and like my husband and I have to unlearn and relearn in the way that we are practicing our parenting approaches. And even though I pride myself that, first of all, I recognize these mistakes and I literally call myself out, and I share this with Alex, and we have this kind of communication about, well, how do I modify this? Like, oh, if something else were to happen similar to this, like, how do I approach it? And so, I pride myself for reflecting on my actions and trying to figure out different ways on how I may want to discipline my child, instead of just like, okay, next time I'm just going to like threaten him and continue on with the same way that I do it, And so at least I have given myself grace with that. And so many of our parents may have shared their advice on how to discipline our kids. I mean, for example, mi suegro one time asked Alex, because Diego, in his eyes, he wasn't behaving well. But granted, he's only 3 years old at the time of this recording. And, mi suegro asked him, oh, ¿por qué no le gritas next time? Like, why don't you scream at him? And like screaming as in like, literally screaming, like raising your voice at him as if like you're showing some sort of authoritative, like, approach. And I'm glad that Alex told him, like, we don't do that. And I think it takes a lot of courage, but also like in a respectful manner, you are already establishing those type of boundaries where you get your parents to understand, like, oh, this is a different generation. And so here we are as a new generation, we are trying to do things differently. And I also see it as a way as how our parents did things differently than their parents. We're always trying to better the next generation. And that is something that is the goal as parents, right? I have my own ideas and beliefs about raising kids in today's world that oftentimes may not be the same as our older generations. And while it can be a tug of war between, tradition and my personal beliefs, it definitely takes time to do things different. And if people judge you because you're too soft or because you don't know how to discipline them well enough, well, again, like this is when you got to set boundaries or just letting them talk, ignore them, because at the end of the day, sometimes they don't really listen to you. And so how can you build your unique parenting style when you have been super influenced with your cultura or family? Well, here are some strategies for creating a parenting style that reflects your values as a first, second generation Latina mom. And so the first one is you may want to identify your core values. Take time to reflect on what's truly important to you. What values from your upbringing do you want to keep? What new values have you developed? And so for me, one of the values that I want to keep is maintaining traditions. And I mean traditions, it's more so like Christmas traditions, but having the sense of pride in identity, in our cultural identity, and learning more about it and even being critical about it. That's something that I really value, that my family has hold true to their cultural identity. I think my family, my parents specifically, have done a really good job in exposing us with just like the foods and, las tradiciones and the language. And I think it unites us. And so that is something that I still want to continue on. But a value that I want to develop is that work is very important to me. And I want my kids to see that even though mommy is around, being a professional or being an entrepreneur is also very important. And that is a way that I get to show them that I'm taking care of myself, that I want to be something than just a mama. And so I wonder, what kind of values would you want to keep and what values you may want to develop? So I think this is a very good strategy to start out with, is to essentially identify your core values. The second strategy is educating yourself. And so it's so important to learn about different parenting styles and techniques. And I'm going to share you a resource that I often use in terms of, well, what kind of parenting style do we want to be? Whether if it's gentle parenting or if it's authoritarian, which is usually not a healthy one, but subconsciously that's how we were raised. And so you have to really do the research to figure out what kind of parenting approaches you would want to implement in your parenting. And again, because of colonialism and because of survival that the past generation has endured, unfortunately, we have to do the work to figure out what is best for us and our families. We have the privilege of having the resources available to us in just like in one little click at the palm of our hands. And so we do have to do the work to figure out, okay, what works for us, what doesn't work. How can we unlearn? How can we relearn? How can we heal? Right? And so knowledge is power. And that's something that I really encourage you to implement, especially if you're thinking about how to create a parenting style that reflects your values. The third strategy that I recommend is to communicate with your partner. Now, if you are in a partnered relationship, it's so important to discuss your parenting values. And this can be from the very beginning when you are expecting, when you are starting to grow a family, or when you are in the transition from one baby to two or two to three or what have you. And so it's important to talk about, okay, what worked for you when you were little? What didn't work? What do you want to continue seeing? What do you not want to see? And so that way you create this sort of framework in terms of how you may want to parent. And that way you can approach this together. And that way you're both in agreement where it's, and if it isn't communicated or wasn't communicated, I mean, that's fine. You can start now. And that way you get to create a parenting journey that's not where you don't have to carry on all of the load. For example, if your kid ends up acting up, your partner may think like, no, we got to discipline them this way, whether if it's just putting them in the corner and just like giving them time out or even spanking them, because let's face it, a lot of people still believe in spanking. And then you have a different value, like because you never communicated this, then this is when oftentimes a lot of couples clash. It's so important to communicate this because you just don't want your partner to either feel like they are shamed, or you also don't want to feel like you're doing all the work. Both of you have to come together. The next strategy is to find your tribe. And you may want to connect with other Latina moms who are either first or second generation, who are kind of in this shared experience as you, who really understand your unique challenges. And for me, I love connecting with moms whose kids are 5 and under, who are first or second generation, who are bilingual, because we shared common challenges. And one of the things that I have done is I've joined a walking group. And so mi amiga Angie, she created this walking group for moms in the Chicago area. And since I started joining her walks in the spring of this year, we've really connected very well. And I think it's because she understands where I come from. I understand where she comes from. And so it's just important to, build community and to find your mommy tribe as much as you can. And if you don't, well, I'm going to tell you how you can find one through Viva la Mami. But it's just so important to connect with other folks that share same experiences as you, because otherwise you're going to feel isolated in your journey. All right. And the final strategy is to be flexible. Remember, parenting is a journey, okay? And it is totally fine to adjust your approach as you learn and grow. Like I said, when that communication piece, if you never talk to your partner, well, guess what? You can do this tonight or tomorrow, or later on this week or this month. But it is such a journey where our parenting journey is not really linear. It ebbs and flows. It goes all over the place. But the reality of things is that we also need to hold ourselves accountable with how we want to parent and the way that we want to present ourselves in front of our kids. Because many of us are still healing from past traumas. And I'm pretty sure you don't want to do this. If you're listening to this episode and if you are part of the Viva la Mami community, we are very well aware that we are not only intentional of our parenting, but it's also how are we healing? How are we changing the next generation? And so in my coaching program, Balanced Motherhood, we emphasize the importance of creating a parenting philosophy that aligns with your personal values. So here's what I teach. Your parenting style should be a reflection of your authentic self. It's not about choosing between your cultural heritage and modern approaches. It's more so about creating a beautiful blend that works for you and your family. Remember, there's no one right way to be a Latina mom, really. It's more so about our existence as parents and how do we want to come about it. And so let's do a quick exercise. I want you to write down 3 traditions or values from your upbringing that you want to keep in your parenting journey. Now, write down 3 modern parenting approaches you'd like to incorporate that are either new or that you've always wanted to, but you just never saw your family do it. And so here's your list. This is the starting point of your unique parenting style. There's no right or wrong way, like I said. It's basically what you and your family want. And so, mamas, this week I challenge you to have an open conversation with your partner or a close friend about your parenting values. Discuss how you blend your cultural heritage with your modern ideals in your day-to-day parenting. And you're more than welcome to share them with me either on Instagram. You can follow me at Viva la Mami if in case you haven't yet, or you can send me an email at podcast@vivalamami.com. And I'm more than happy to see what you do because I think it's so important to share our stories and share our experiences so that other mommies don't feel alone in their journey. And so remember, building your unique parenting style is a journey, not a destination. It's okay to experiment, adapt, and change as you go along the way. The most important thing is that your approach feels authentic to you and where it nurtures your children in a way that aligns with your own values as a family, not as what your parents may think or what you think that our culture is perceived by, right? And so if you are ready to dive deeper into creating a parenting style that truly reflects who you are as a first or second generation Latina mom, I would love for you to be a part of the Balanced Motherhood program. In this coaching program, we dedicate an entire module to this topic. We'll explore in-depth strategies for blending our cultura, setting boundaries with family, and creating family traditions that reflect your unique values. If you want to learn more, visit vivalamami.com/balanced motherhood. That is balanced with a D at the end, -motherhood to join the waitlist. Doors are closing soon. And so remember, you have the power to define what it means to be a Latina mom in today's world. Amiga, just embrace your journey. It's unique. It's beautiful. And if you want to change it, you have that power too. Okay, amiga. Well, thank you so much for listening. Hasta la próxima. And I'll catch you in the next episode.
Mujer, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to the Viva la Mami podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, will you do me a favor and follow the podcast and leave a rating and review? Hitting that follow button and reviewing my show will allow other mommies like you find this podcast. Your review will also tell me if you enjoy the show, so I would truly appreciate your thoughts. Don't forget, please share this podcast con tus amigas. Also, make sure to follow me at Viva la Mami on Instagram or visit vivalamami.com. Please note the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. Okay, mujer, thank you for joining y nos vemos in the next episode.